Bless Radio. It is Tuesday night, just after 6 p.m. Welcome to the Spiritual Discussion Program. This is Brother Femi here. I'm in the London studio representing Brother Syed as he's not able to make it today. As usual, I have my panelists with me. Brother Gregory, are you on the line?
Hello, can you hear me?
Very well, loud and clear. Good evening, Brother Gregory, and how are you?
Still alive and kicking and looking forward to the program.
Excellent. Are you in Brussels or in Copenhagen this week?
I'm in Copenhagen
Okay.
for now.
And hopefully the weather is somewhat more bearable
Well,
for
it's
you.
been very bright and not too hot, so it's bearable.
So just the way you would like it. Excellent. Brother Ryan, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Brother Ryan,
Brother
very
Femi,
good to hear your voice again. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
And in Germany from Munster?
Yes, of course.
Of course, indeed. Weather-wise, cooler, warmer, same as last week?
It's so hot that people start people start complaining
Oh,
about
really?
the lovely weather. I'm not complaining still.
I guess that's just human nature. We can never be satisfied. But
Yeah.
let's make the most of what we have before it all disappears. And Brother William, are you there? Hello, Brother William. Are you
Yes,
on
good
mute?
afternoon. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you seem a bit far from the microphone.
Okay. Yes. Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and listeners and fellow panelists.
Can you increase your volume, please? We can hear you, but you sound a bit faint.
Oh, uh, my volume is
On maximum.
it's yes, it is.
Okay. Okay. Welcome to the show, Brother William.
Yes, thank you very much.
And trust you've had a good week so far.
Yes, so far so good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, dear listeners, yes, I do have my three panelists with me in Brother Rainer, Brother Gregory, and Brother William. I'm Brother Femi from the London studio. And the purpose of the show, as hopefully you know, is to have a spiritual discussion based on the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. The normal format for this show is we have a new topic every week, and the topic for tonight is morality. So we are going to be delving into the concept of morality. Hopefully, it should be a lively and useful show for our listeners. You can certainly join this show with your questions and comments by contacting us. If you're in the UK, the number to call is 079 444 31366. I repeat, 079 444 31366. You can, of course, also send an SMS text message, or you can contact us via WhatsApp. So, whichever method is easier for you, do get in touch. If you're calling from outside of the UK, then you will need to add the international dialing code of +44 followed by the 79444 31366. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will start with a brief reading on what the Grail message is. As I said earlier on, the sole purpose of this show is to introduce our listeners to this wonderful work called the Grail message. which hopefully, from your personal examination of the work, you will be able to make some amazing discoveries that should be extremely useful for your life. So, what is the Grail message? The Grail message, in the light of truth, by Abdushin, is a spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life, for through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic workings of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized, and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover through the intuitive perception if what is stated is the truth. Combining with matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. Now, with that brief background on the Grail message, I would like to give a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail message himself, Abdushin. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole without leaving any gaps. Again and again, in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail message lives so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals. The author also says, I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the soul of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So, ladies and gentlemen, with those readings, I think we will start the show. Question on morality. The theme, as I said earlier on, for today is morality. So, what actually is morality? Because I guess different people may perceive that word from a different way. So if I can direct that question to Brother Gregory, what actually is morality?
Well, thanks for that particular question, which I will repeat. What is morality? Strictly speaking, it is that being able to distinguish what is right from what is wrong. That forms the framework of morality. Looking at the person or looking at the human being, and it is assumed that at any moment, at any scenario, that particular individual is able to differentiate that which is right from that which is wrong, rather than just saying, well, it's unable to differentiate. So that forms the basis of morality.
Okay. So thank you for that, Brother Gregory. I think I want to explore this further. So I will go to Brother William this time around. So, Brother William, obviously, as a professional with the exposure that you have in terms of youth and adolescence, in today's world, how do you see morality?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. And like you said, and my fellow panelist has talked about uh, that ability to distinguish what is right and what is wrong. And it's important to emphasize that this can be quite subjective, in the sense that for some people, what is right might differ from others, and what is wrong might differ from others. Um, but there are also some basic things that we, as human beings, have come to feel the right thing or the wrong things, the basic things that really inform on human decency, as it were. Um, but if we look at what is happening in society today, I think it's fair to say that there are some who might think that we have made progress, but there are also some of us who might think actually we might be moving in the wrong direction here. Are we really making progress? When we deal with a lot of the young people, I deal with a lot of young people, and I try to get a sense, of their value system, and the things that they hold dear to them, and a lot of my observation has been a void, deep-seated feelings of inadequacy, a sense that there's no clear direction as to, what life is about, what purpose there is to life, and also basically any clear sense of basic morals or ethics, because I know that morality and ethics, can are sometimes used interchangeably. So I guess for the benefit or the purpose of this show, we're speaking, I guess, from a spiritual perspective, a spiritual perspective of morality. What is right? What is wrong? Perhaps we might even start to by giving some examples. What do we consider as morally right, and what is morally wrong? So that these are things that potentially can be quite subjective. But if we're looking at it from a spiritual point of view, if we're looking at it from a spiritual point of view, then we cannot avoid bringing in the natural laws, as in we as creatures of creation, um, how much or to what extent have we asked ourselves what is right in the eyes of the creator, not what we feel is right, what is his will, and by our actions, are we contravening his laws or his will? And so, when we talk about morality, uh, if there's no knowledge attached to that sense of morality, it is very difficult to determine for a lot of people what is right and really what is not is wrong. So I think that very importantly, knowledge and the right knowledge, the true knowledge or the truth has to be, the bedrock with which, to start to develop a sense of that of morality or what is right or what is wrong. And I think that is generally lacking in a society today, and that's why it does seem like a lot of people have really swayed or derailed or missed their way or don't have a sense of direction or a sense of purpose about what life is about or where they're going. So, is humanity or mankind in a healthy state? I would have to say that I don't think so. And a lot has to do with the fact that we are not living according to those expectations or moral principles, or what I would use more importantly, the will or the laws of the Creator, which obviously should pervade all aspects of morality. So I'll just stop there at this point.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer, Brother William. Before I actually go on to the next question, which is from what you've said, for the benefit of our listeners, I'm just going to try and summarize what I believe you've said, and also what Brother Gregory mentioned earlier on. So, we're talking about morals, we're talking about ethics, we're talking about rights, we're talking about wrongs. And as you've rightly clarified, these things are very subjective. What would be deemed to be right in one country by law may actually be frowned upon seriously in another country. Same thing at the individual level. What I may feel is totally acceptable from a moral perspective, you may think is not the case. And of course, again, as you've said, we're talking about morals, ethics, morality within the context of human beings, within the context of mankind. So, again, if we look at the development of humanity, even in the recent past, as in over the last 100, 200 years, things have changed drastically, dramatically. Standards of expectations have changed. So there seems to be this constant change in standards of morals, in standards of ethics, in effectively in morality. And so the question then arises, does that mean that morality is always going to be a subjective issue and would always be a relative concept, and that there are no absolutes when we're talking about morals and ethics in relation to human beings? If I put that question to Brother Reiner, please.
Thank you for the question. I just repeat it as I understood it. The question was, are there any objective standards on objective way to find out what is moral behavior and what is immoral behavior? And first of all, let me just broaden a little bit the aspect of morality. Morality is something which encompasses every action of the human being. It encompasses every thought. It encompasses speaking, thinking, moving, acting, doing things, with interacting with other human beings. Shortly, everything. Everything can be immoral or can be more on the moral side. Now, how do we find that out? And definitely, Morality is not written down in a book which says this is moral or this is not immoral. There are many books which do that, and we know that famous sentence in Islam: command what is right, forbid what is wrong. And that what is right and wrong you find in the Quran and or the Hadith or the Sunnahs. But actually it is not like this. What we have to find out is, can we perceive if an action is more noble and more beautiful, or if it's more on the vulgar side and on the ugly side? And this is just a question of inner mobility, of being inwardly awake, of being inwardly alive, and being able to weigh each time what is the right action. And if it goes towards mobility, towards nobility, then of course it is more moral. But there's no book which covers all the cases. We have to become alive, awake inside, and we've got the capabilities to do that, to find out the moral way to act. And I will hand it back to you, because just one word perhaps. And this is of course an alive spirit. The alive spirit, if we can listen to our spirit and if we kept it awake, that inner voice, then we can decide on the right action, on a beautiful action, on a noble action, which benefits the environment, which benefits the other human being. I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you for that, Brother Reiner. So, from what you're saying, uh, practically every aspect of human day to day living raises the issue of our moral standards, and therefore morality permeates everything. And you've made it clear that there is much to do with the individual, because embedded within the individual entity is that subtle prompting that guides him towards the higher moral standards in principle. Now, I would like to go back to Brother William, because part of the answer that you gave previously, just for clarification, um, did did state that the issue of morals was subjective. What is right, what is wrong. And as I also said, after yours, that what is right and what is wrong seems to be changing from generation to generation, from decade to get decade, and from year to year, basically. So, does that mean that we have no absolutes? That this whole issue of morality will forever and a day be a subjective thing? How can an individual who is truly trying to be moral, to very high standard in all that he or she does, how can such a person know what is absolutely true, what is absolutely right, and that which is indeed not right? To Brother William, please.
Yeah. Yes, thanks again for that question. And again, just further to what I said before, that as long as you know the principle uh, behind morality is not based on true knowledge, is not based on the truth, which is eternal, which remains the same today, tomorrow, and forever. The truth is the same. Now, how we perceive it might change based on our level of maturity or development. However, the truth remains the truth. And so the basis for morality has to be that having that true knowledge. And I also mentioned before, that morality, when we really talk about morality in the strict sense, from a spiritual point of view, we should be thinking about it in terms of not our will, humanity, because we are creatures of creation and we must not get conceited about these things. We are creatures of creation, and we were created under through the laws of the Creator, through the will of the Creator. And so we must endeavor, to find or to ask ourselves or to acquaint ourselves or with the true knowledge about this will of the Creator, not our will. Because as long as it is not based on that absolute truth, then the goalposts will continue to shift. And that is what has been happening for the last few centuries. If we take, for instance, the fact that there are certain things, aspects of society today, that about 50 years or 100 years ago, these things would have been seriously frowned at. They would have been frowned at. In fact, they would have been, you would have done some of these things, and you would have been looked at, almost as an outcast. And yet, as the centuries or as the years or decades have gone by, all these barriers seem to be falling, and we're talking about freedom of this, we're talking about all these liberal principles of democracy and a whole bunch of stuff that I hope time would permit us to look into or dwell on today. But all these barriers are falling down, and so we to the progressives, we are making progress, but we must understand that progress, can be in the form, it can be in two directions. We can either be making progress in a positive direction or in a negative direction. But regardless, as long as humanity does not start to concern themselves about the will of the Almighty, then, the which are manifested in His laws, then we are really, sailing in very, very unfamiliar territory, and the truth or the reality of the situation right now is this. Quite frankly, it has become extremely difficult to really determine or distinguish, what is good and what is bad. It is becoming a lot more difficult, and the reason really behind it really is that, a lot of us think that what is bad, we're looking for what is bad in some of the outright evil type things that are going on. But no, the darkness, has usurped a lot of things and is controlling so much and everything that's happening in the earthly right now, that even things that we actually think are right, we are actually serving the darkness. And yet the darkness has been able to usurp these things, and is continuing to perpetrate these things on the basis that what we're doing is humanitarian, is humane. So I tell you one way in which things have gone wrong. One particular way in which things have gone really awry is in the distortion of the concepts. So we have these concepts that a lot over time they've become watered down and distorted. And now, really, in the strict sense of things, if to distinguish between what is right and wrong, or what is bad and what is right and wrong, or what is dark and what is light. Now, darkness now basically is anything that binds you to matter, because this is not our home. We must remember that, and we've been talking about this in the previous shows that we've had, that we're just like visitors here. This is just like a school for us. But a lot of things that we're doing, are binding to matter. That means that they just become so mundane that there's nothing uplifting about some of these things, and that in itself is serving the darkness. Now, a lot of things we're doing might be supporting these things, and we feel we're doing the right thing. After all, is good, is the humanitarian thing to do. But some of these things are actually serving, the darkness. They are not serving the light. The light, what is good, has to be striving towards the light, has to be, of a spiritual purpose. You know, another thing that Mr. Reiner also mentioned, which is important to stress, is that as we start to mature, as we start to mature and develop and become more alert spiritually, as in once the spirit becomes, or who we are, the very core, the soul becomes more active, as it were. Because in most of us, the soul is very dormant, literally fettered, and not even is not even able to assert itself at all. But the more alert we are spiritually, we gradually start to realize and start to sense some of these things. But right now, as humanity stands right now, it is actually very difficult to discern, whether you are serving a good cause or not, because the darkness seems to have usurped everything, and most of the concepts have been distorted. Before I stop, let me just give you one example, of one of the distorted concepts. So, for instance, let's if we think about the concept of forgiveness, forgiveness. Now, forgiveness, if you think about what forgiveness really means, forgiveness is basically saying that you don't want to, bind yourself to what the perpetrator has done, so you want to detach yourself from that action, but forgiveness does not mean permissiveness, in that sense, indulgence. So the concept of forgiveness has now been distorted to mean indulgence and permissiveness. And so you can now see that when you indulge people, that are clearly doing the wrong thing, are you really helping them to mature? You achieve the very opposite, you see. So a lot of these concepts have been distorted. Happiness, what true happiness is. Happiness has been distorted, and now we're made to feel that to be happy, we need to be content. And in an earthly point of view, contentment, can actually stand in the way of you being happy. Contentment because you've been able to buy 10 houses, or because you've been able to drive that car, or other things that, and these things are of a mundane nature, or you've been able to achieve or reach the pinnacle of your career, and so you're meant to be content. But I also know people who have achieved all these things, and they tell you that they're not happy. And why are they not happy? Because happiness, where they're looking for happiness, is the wrong place. Happiness is a spiritual thing, and you cannot find, happiness on externals. So you see, it's quite complex, but I don't want to start to go too deep. But just suffice it to say, really, that for morality, the basis of morality has to be that true knowledge, has to be knowledge based on the will of the Creator, has to be based on having an alert spirit, maturing and having an alert spirit to be able to discern these things. Because a lot of us, identify with causes that are frankly perpetrating the darkness, and we're not conscious of these things. Yeah.
Thank you so much. There is so much in what you've said, which we need to delve into in a bit more detail. But before we do that, I would like to remind our listeners that you are listening to the spiritual discussion program on Bless Radio. Every Tuesday evening from 6 to 8 p.m., there is the spiritual discussion program, which is normally anchored by Brother Sad, but he's not available today. So I, Brother Femi, am holding fort for him this evening, and we are talking about morality. Morality within the context of human existence. Please feel to join in the show with questions, comments, by either phoning us, sending us an SMS, or you could also use WhatsApp. The number is +44 if you're dialing in from outside of the UK. So that's +44 079 444 313 So I repeat again, 079 444 313 This show is based on the knowledge that is given in the Grail message. The Grail message can be obtained online from thegrailmessage.com or from any of the more popular online bookstores. And today we are talking about morality. Brother William just explained quite a lot of things, which I'm going to try and summarize for all our benefits. So my question was: is morality always subjective? Does it change from generation to generation, from decade to decade, and from probably from day to day? And the reality, from what we see around us on an ongoing basis, is that yes, it does seem to change in people's psyche based on what society has come to accept as being okay, as being right, and what is deemed to be wrong by society. Now, a fundamental thing which Brother Williams said earlier on, and which is absolutely critical for everyone to understand, is that true morality within the correct context of what it is of a spiritual nature. And to therefore understand it, you need to have a certain basic knowledge of spiritual principles. Like Brother William explained as well, that spirituality, the truth, does not change. It has been what it is from before we were created, and it will always continue to be what it is. What, of course, is happening is that in the limited experiences that we are immersed in here on earth, in grappling to understand the context that we exist in, we struggle and we strive to actually understand spirituality. Unfortunately, we're not doing that very well, as Brother William also said, and tried to explain about how concepts have been massively distorted, even though one may actually think that a cause that one is supporting is actually a noble thing. So where does one rediscover that which is truth? How does one know that I'm pursuing this course of action, I am making this decision, this is actually in line with what is expected of me from a spiritual perspective, and therefore I am complying with the natural laws of life? Brother Gregory, can you please shed some light for us on that? How can a human being who is struggling to be the best that they can be truly know that a cause that they're supporting, an action that they wish to take, words or even their thought processes, that it is truly moral, that it will stand up to that examination of being accurate, of being right spiritually? How can an individual know this, Brother Gregory?
Well, thanks for that particular question. Just a bit of clarification about morality. What has happened is basically the lack of clarity of what morality is. And the question keeps popping up, is it absolute or relative? What is relative about morality is our understanding, is the individual understanding of the different persons that is relative. But morality stands on its own. That ability to distinguish that which is right from what is wrong is not relative. That which is right swings unconditionally in the will of the Creator, who puts everything, all the substances, into the creation that has been called into being. And we should also realize that only through the will of the Creator that it, the human spirit, came into existence. That being the case, one will not be talking about is morality relative, because the will of the Lord Almighty is personal and perfect. So whatever is perfect does not need to change. If it changes, then it wasn't perfect. Therefore, one should understand that it's our understanding of morality which is causing the confusion. There must be a difference when this discussion goes on. When you look at the personality, by personality, one is not referring to the intellectual person. One is referring to the core, that which makes a person, a human being. That is the spirit, which spirit makes use of the physical body. The physical body has the brain. The brain produces the intellect. It is the understanding of the intellect which is relative. Therefore, if one intends to speak aright or to judge aright, one must use those qualities which are more permanent, that is, those qualities of the spirit. And therefore, morality must be well understood with the correct framework or the correct reference to the spirit, where the spirit to swing aright, were it to vibrate with such vibrancy as to perceive correctly, then the question of morality being relative will vanish. Then you will have the inner human being be able to distinguish that which is right and that which is not right. For in doing so, it will not then burden itself. No human spirit will want to knowingly burden itself or bind itself to one thing or another such that it's unable to be free to make progress in its maturing. Should that happen, it means that human spirit, for one reason or the other, did not have clarity or was not, mobile enough within itself to distinguish. It must be stressed here that when morality is discussed, if you look at the human spirit from birth, you do not discuss morality when you are talking, discussing about a child who is 6 months old, or 1 year old, or 2 years old. You don't discuss morality and say, oh, it's relative and all that. But as the person matures, it gets to a place, it gets to a point where there is some definite maturity, where the human spirit has full command of the physical body, has full command of the physical abilities, and is now able to make decisions, not just intellectual decisions, but spiritual decisions. That is the point when morality comes in, because it is now assumed that the spirit has taken over, all right, and this particular person is matured enough on earth to be able to make decisions in order to mature. That is when morality is then mentioned. And whereas prior to that age of maturity, you do not really think about it when, say, a child is 1 or 2 years old. Although nowadays you have maturity coming very quickly. So as long as one knows that in the case of morality, whenever it's discussed, it is the inner man that is referred to, the inner man as it should be. And that only takes place at a certain age, where if we want to examine the work in the light of truth, the grail message, one will find the place where the inner man is now free to move forth, all right, in order to experience. That's the age where the generative power is, it's as if things are opened up, where the person is able to move forward in order to experience. Then the activities which then come forth may weave for them a karma which is binding, or a karma which will help them to mature.
Okay.
One we refer to as a good karma, because in their activities they are able to further creation in the right upbuilding.
Okay.
So how is a human spirit supposed to differentiate that which is right from that which is wrong? The answer becomes very simple. Become spiritual.
Okay.
Use the intuitive perception which have been granted you aright. Then such questions will no more arise, for you will have sensed way beforehand that which is all building and that which is not. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Gregory. You said a lot there, and one of the things that you kept on emphasizing was that certain questions will no longer arise when you become spiritual. The reality, of course, is that for the vast majority of the world today, what exactly being spiritual means probably is seriously misunderstood. But we're not trying to delve into that concept just yet, because I actually have a question from a listener which links to what you've just been saying. Now, again, for the benefit of our listeners, I'll just summarize, because we seem to be creating a clearer picture of morality here. Brother Reiner made it clear that morality actually permeates everything, anything and everything that we are doing. In the true sense, the issue of morality arises. So it's not simply as a result of what we say or think or do, but it encompasses the whole range of human action, thoughts, and word processes. You just explained further, Brother Gregory, that morality kicks in at the age of maturity, when the individual can be held responsible for their actions, for their works. And so, to the question which I have here, and the question goes as follows: how do you know what is wrong or right? Is it based on what the law says, or is it based on what you are taught by your parents and the society? How do you really know what is wrong or right? That is a question to Brother Reiner, and I would please like to suggest that let us look at this from the point of view of the average human being who is not a religious person, who has the some faint will or some faint wish within himself or herself to do that which is right, to be a good person, and this individual is struggling to really know, how do I know what is wrong or what is right? Over to you, Brother Reiner.
Thank you very much for the question. And I think with that question, we can clarify a few points or make them more visible in contour what has been said before. We've been asking all the time, is there an absolute measure where we can know what is wrong or right? And let me just put it this way. If something is progressive or reactive, that is not important, that concept. We know that we can progress upwards or downwards. But what is important is that absolute measure now. Does our action lead us upwards, any other person I'm interacting with, or does it lead downwards? And now there are many things with upwards and downwards which we can tie to it. Let us say a downwards action always is oppressing in some way, and an upwards action on the environment, on another human being, is always in a way liberating and makes that other person feel good and makes yourself as a reciprocal action feel good. So we have something like a notion like, does it lead towards more oppression or is it more freeing? And this faculty, we can weigh ourselves in an absolute terms. If we have awakened our spirit, and the Grail message is really, to a large extent, it says it is absolutely necessary that we awake again, that we wake up, that we become alive again inwardly. Then we can decide on those questions, and then we know what is right or wrong. Let me put on with the upwards and downwards dichotomy another few words. If I take an aesthetic term like ugly, everything which goes downwards goes towards a more ugly behavior, a more repulsive behavior. All moral terms, repulsive, ugly, seedy, vulgar, there are hundreds of terms. They all describe the effects of an action or the status of another thing. And I think many people still today know what is vulgar or what is seedy. They feel it just through their intuition. And on the other hand, that which goes upwards goes towards purity, and that the action is then more heavenly, lighter, and more wonderful, and more beneficial for the environment. So if we have something which goes towards purity, then of course it is a good thing, and we can perceive that with our intuition. The alive intuition is the absolute measure for deciding if an action is going in the right direction. And it's only the direction which is absolute. If I go upwards, it must go upwards. Of course, when I've reached that upper state, I can go further up, and I can go further up and further up. So the further up I go, the morals, the behaviors, the set of behaviors, they will change and become more beautiful and more beautiful and lighter. In the end, if I always go upwards, I will have a reflection of paradise here on earth. I will not have paradise, that's impossible, but will have a reflection of paradise here on earth. But to make it once again clear, it is not written, you do not find it written in a book. You find the Grail message gives you the laws to find the right direction, but the evolution of behavior is endless, and it will become more beautiful and more lofty and more noble, nobility upwards mobility, and reaching nobility in behavior. That is the ultimate aim. And here we've got the instrument which says towards noble or ignoble behavior. The compass is our spirit. This we must keep alive, and it registers very easily. It is, you do not find it written in a book. If you find something written in a book, it is an outward rule. Let us say, we have here, for example, if you walk with a lady and you do not let the lady carry up something heavy, but you as a man take over that parcel or take over that weight. This is, of course, it sounds immediately right when you know a little bit more about woman and man and how it should be. It symbolizes something which is right. The woman is the more precious, the more fine thing, and the man is more heavier, more working outwards in the gross material, so he should carry that thing for her. And even in schoolboys in Germany, I know we were often so glad if we could help the girls in the classroom and just carry the satchel for that girl. It made us feel like walking on clouds. And like this, you have lots of habits being formed which are more or less beautiful. And those habits, of course, are evolving. So to make my point short now, I say we have an absolute compass in us which tells us what is right and what is wrong. It is not, and it is something evolving what is right and what is wrong, but the direction is absolute. This which goes towards ennoblement of yourself, ennoblement of your environment, ennoblement of the other person, towards a more beautiful behavior, that is the right thing, and that which tears, which is more oppressing, which is pushes things downwards, more to the ugly, to the ugly behavior or the vulgar behavior, that of course is wrong. And we must always ask ourselves the question, with my action, do I help the other person in a positive sense to become a freer, more self-assured person, or am I, through my demands on the other person, besmirching the other person's or make it dirty through my wishes? And I think I leave it with that.
Okay.
And I think we have now come to a point where we really can say there is an absolute measure, and to perceive what is right and wrong, we must come to that point. We must reawaken our spirits, and like a previous speaker, I think Brother William said, that's a major task, because that voice is silenced in us and it is buried so deeply in us, and we are practically, one can say, in a death slumber. And the Grail message really describes the reasons for that death slumber and describes ways how to awaken that spirit again, to free it from the walls surrounding it, where it's kept in darkness and becomes more feeble and feeble every day. So back to you, Brother
Thank you,
Femi.
Brother Rainer, from that discourse, because I mean, for me personally, anyway, there were some very key points that came out. So we do have a number of other questions, which I will come to as we go through this. But I would just like to add a few things to what you've said. You're absolutely right. There would not be a rule book that says this is morality. Of course, we do have the law of each land that explicitly states what is allowed or what is not allowed within certain contexts, which every citizen is expected to abide by. And so you could ask the question that as long as I do all those things, does that mean that I'm moral? The simple answer will be no, because morality, true morality, is not a human standard. It is not a social standard. It is a spiritual standard that is dictated by the Creator Himself. It has been the same and will always be the same. But one very important point which Brother Reiner also raised in his discourse was for want of a better expression, the evolution of morality. That as you, the human being, becomes more noble, as you begin to awaken, to strive, and to pursue that which uh, um, gives joy to your inner man, to your soul, you would suddenly begin to discover that the standards that you're expecting of yourself, of how you interface and interact with others, you put yourself to a higher standard. And so, even though in its ultimate sense, in absolute terms, morality does not change. It is linked with the Creator. But we, human beings, collectively or individually, as we develop, as we become more aware spiritually, we put ourselves to a higher way of being, a higher standard we demand of ourselves, and hopefully we become more moral in that context. Now, that said, question for Brother William here. Brother
Sorry,
William,
I'm not cutting you short. For the sake of consistency, what you have just described is that morality is not what goes through the evolution, because it remains the same. It is the human spirits who are evolving the concepts. That is a big difference. So there is no evolution of morality, but there is an evolution of the human spirit in its maturing, and therefore has higher concepts or higher standards.
thank
So
you
these
for the
are two different
clarification.
things.
That was actually indeed what I meant, which is why I've said morality proper is absolute and never changes. But as Brother Reiner appropriately explained, that the individual is growing, the individual is evolving, hopefully to become a better person, and as a result of that, the standards of morality, both for the person or for their community, it seems to be changing, because it is actually changing to reflect the spiritual standing of that individual or that group of people. But that now results in a question for Brother William for some further clarification. Because Brother William, you clearly explained how concepts have been watered down and have been distorted. You gave the example of forgiveness. Now, Brother Reiner, in his last discourse, said something along the lines of how do you know that which is right and that which is wrong? That when you're doing that which is right, you feel within yourself that you're doing that which is right. You feel a certain level of joy that you are doing something, and that gives you a certain upliftment, which in quotes, tells you that you're doing something that is right. Now, forgiveness, using the same example that you gave, someone does something wrong or unpleasant to me, and I basically say that I forgive that person, and I have a certain level of satisfaction within myself. Is Does that mean that what I am doing is morally right? Again, you gave the example of different causes that exist here on Earth today. I may choose. I mean, there are so many that I can mention, but I may take the view, as many do, that there is absolutely nothing wrong in self-expression. That so I want to support a cause that allows people to express themselves as they wish, because that's the right thing to do, and I feel a certain level of satisfaction with myself for doing that, which I'm sure is a reality with many people that support various causes. But that I feel that level of satisfaction or happiness within myself, does that really mean I'm on the right path? Does that really mean that I'm going down the path of appropriate morality? Brother William, please.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. And it's really, really important because, like I mentioned, that the way things have progressed or the way things have evolved, to borrow that phrase, um, a lot of us are not able to discern clearly what really is the right cause and what is the wrong cause. Now, part of the problem, again, in trying to trace the genesis of the problem, the first thing, and that has been stressed this afternoon or this evening, is that morality has to be something that is viewed from a spiritual from a spiritual point of view, from a spiritual perspective. So if, if we look at it in that way, then one thing that we have to also agree with, is that for most of us, that true ego, that core, the entity, the true ego consciousness, who we really are, that spirit, for the vast majority of us, that spirit is languishing, that spirit is fettered, that spirit is lying dormant, is more or less in a comatose state, occupying the body, the physical cloak, is not active. So is what has taken over most of us, what is determining our actions and our deeds, is mostly the intellect. So the intellectual will, So the intellect, we've bound our free will, which is a spiritual characteristic or ability that we have, you know, and so the intellect has taken up that over, So it's our intellectual will at play, okay? And then what a lot of us consider as emotions, and which is part of the danger, that is what, and I'm going to explain something that call, touches on a lot of the religious sentiments that a lot of us display. In fact, the fanaticism that a lot of us experience or are privy to these days. So what is happening really is that you, on the one hand, you have the intellect that has usurped the throne of the spirit, has completely silenced the spirit, and the spirit and the voice of the spirit, the intuition, is completely silent and choked off, for most of us. And so the intellectual will is what is dominant. But what is also more dangerous right now, you know, is that this same intellect, which is produced by the forebrain, which is produced by the frontal brain, has also hijacked the feeling, you see. So that's what makes it more dangerous, that even though you're doing something that it feels right, but actually, what used to be, so in when things had not become distorted, the feeling was under the control of the intuition, was under the control of the spirit. But now with the spirit lying languid and fettered, the word fettered within the, in the human, occupying the cloak, the intellect has also hijacked this feeling as well. So a lot of us, even though we're feeling right about these things, you know you're still serving the intellect. And we must also understand that the intellect, as we know it, is bound to space and time. And that means really that things of a supra earthly nature are far above the pay grade of the intellect. The intellect does not have the ability to appreciate these things, doesn't have the ability to appreciate things of a spiritual purport. So the feeling you're doing something that is probably giving you pleasure, you feel great about it, you feel really excited about it, does not necessarily mean that there is a spiritual link to that thing. And so and we must be very, very clear about it. you know Pleasure, what gives us pleasure, and joy, true happiness, they're different. Pleasures, where there are many pleasures, but these things are transient. They're tied to the mundane. And so, yes, we might do stuff and we're feeling excited about it, but actually, no, it does not mean that it is the right thing to do, from a moral or from a spiritual point of view. And the reason why it's become so difficult is because, like I said, that part of us that should be discerning these things and truly experiencing, what we come across, is not active at all. And so the most important thing for most of us, you know is to strive to awaken, to strive to give to awaken this part of us, this spirit, this spiritual part of or element to us, because that's what really makes that clear distinction when the spirit is alert. Okay. And so again, we were talking about these concepts, and how these concepts have been, because it's very, very important to know, or to come to realize, that if as long as these concepts are distorted, you know the darkness takes control of everything that's happening. you know Happiness is a spiritual thing, but the darkness has usurped that. Freedom is true freedom in the true sense, you know associated with the free will, is a spiritual characteristics. But what has the darkness talked about? The darkness talking about freedom of speech, freedom to do whatever you like, freedom to do, as think as you want, provided that you're not causing any harm to anybody in the process. But we know that these things are a lot deeper than that. Things are a lot more complicated than that, and that freedom that the liberal progressive society wanted to brag about or boast about can actually be making things a lot worse for people. How can you talk about freedom? Freedom is something that cannot be compatible. True freedom is not compatible with arbitrariness. They're not. You cannot be talking about freedom when knowledge and truth are not the basis of that freedom. Any kind of freedom that is not aligned with the will or the laws of the Almighty, it cannot be true freedom. It cannot be, you see. So we must first of all understand that these concepts, these are where we start to discern really what is right and what is wrong. These are that we must correct these concepts. We must form the right conceptions, because if we don't, we bind ourselves to the mundane, we bind ourselves to matter, so we're not striving towards the light, but really sinking deeper and deeper. And we have this a euphoric feeling that we're doing the right thing. Meanwhile, we're just perpetrating the darkness. And the fact remains that evil, as a lot of us want to see it, you know, as we're talking about evolution, evil, it has even evolved. The darkness has evolved things, and what is overtly evil these days, is not as we want to see it. So it's taking on a different color, very sinister, really. And so we must understand and expose these things so that we start to improve and know what the problem is. And let me give you an illustration about it. You see, if, for instance, I'm fighting a war, I'm fighting a battle, okay, and basically, I mount my defense right there at the front of the city, right there, put everything I have right there at the front of the city. You see, my enemy actually knows where I've mounted my defense. Yeah. And what does my enemy do? My enemy just circumvents and just goes in a very sinister backward way, behind way, and then enters, penetrates without me even realizing that the enemy has penetrated. Meanwhile, I'm waiting for the enemy right in front. I'm putting up a very strong army to defend me. And that's what is happening in the world today. That the darkness is taking over everything. And we don't realize these things, and we are identifying with all these causes, that are supposed to, first of all, gratify ourselves that we're good in that sense. Meanwhile, we're just carrying on and perpetrating the evil or the darkness. So we can only talk about the light in terms of the actions when what we're doing is striving towards the light, is striving towards nobility, is striving towards uplifting that environment that we find ourselves. Yeah. And then gradually, like our fellow panelists have talked about, that gradually we should, by now, if we had developed the way we should have developed, we should be talking about almost a paradise-like state here on Earth. But it is not so. And then let us also learn from history. Let us also learn from history, because if we go back into the not too distant past, or into the past, where a lot of these barriers fell, where there was shamelessness, debauchery, bestiality. Let us look at all these empires that extol these vices and all these things, and let's think about what happened to all of them. You know, let's think of what happened to all of them, because a lot of the things that are happening in the world today, in the name of progress, are total shamelessness and retrogression. And there can only be one pathway, whether we like it or not. We cannot circumvent the laws of the creator or the universe and expect a different outcome, but doom. So I'll just stop there, because
Wow.
this is something that's quite
Yes, indeed,
passionate to
indeed.
me.
In fact, one looks around and you almost wonder where to next. But I think in the midst of all that has been said so far, one thing, well, a few things stand out, but I think the most critical and the most urgent thing that stands out for me, and maybe and hopefully for the listeners as well, is the fact that we need spiritual knowledge. We need correct spiritual knowledge, because, quite simply, without that, the human being is more or less lost from a spiritual perspective. So, where do you get spiritual knowledge from? And know that the spiritual knowledge that you have um, is indeed, one, correct, and two, knowledge that you can hopefully um, apply to your day to day existence. The purpose of this show, ladies and gentlemen, this spiritual discussion program, is to introduce all to the Grail message, The Grail message is a spiritual work that covers the entirety of human existence, both here on earth and in the beyond. The Grail message is addressed to the individual, not to a community, not to a social grouping, not to a country, but to the individual. I think with what we have been discussing so far tonight, it should be obvious, hopefully, that there is a sense of urgency that each and every one of us needs to equip ourselves with clarity about our spirituality, with a clear understanding of what our Creator expects from us, and then we need to seek the appropriate help, the appropriate resources, and the appropriate tools to be able to start bringing that into to bear in our day-to-day lives. Dear listeners, if you do have questions or comments, please call in, text us, or WhatsApp us on +44, the international dialing code for the UK, 79 444, so that's 444 313 66. So I have some questions here, like I said earlier on, to my panel, and I will direct this question to Brother Reiner. And this is about maturity in relation to morality. And the question goes as follows: if the generative power, that is the age of maturity, happens at a specific stage, would you say that parents teaching their young children right and wrong are engaging in a futile exercise, that parents should actually wait till a certain age to teach right and wrong, or probably not teach this at all, since according to the speaker, morality happens at maturity? To Brother Reiner, do you understand the question?
Um, I think I understand. Let me just repeat it and cross-check if I understand it rightly. The question is, during the age of puberty, when the generative power, that's the term in the Grail message, in the English version, which is very difficult to understand and does not make a lot of sense to me, but okay, there is the time and its generative power sets in and does certain things with the whole body, and at this moment the human being becomes fully responsible for its action, and it actually can decide what is, or should be able to decide what is right and what is wrong, which way to go, what to do and what not to do. At this time is of course a time of turmoil in education, and young people become very difficult during that time. Is it really worthwhile to teach the children at this time?
Or to actually to teach
the
them
notion what is wrong and what is right.
Yes.
Is there such a thing that we can teach them those notions, what is wrong and right at that time? Or should we not do it at all? Let me say, unfortunately, I had not the luck to have any children of my own, but perhaps some other person might like to speak out of experience, but I see it I've got acquaintances, and I can see the children, I can see the problems they are having. And if you, as a basic simple rule, the Grail message said, if you have educated your child properly, and I know it's very difficult in today's time, that child will be a joy to you, will become a joyful experience for you and a very rewarding experience. And also that time where I call it now the sexual force instead of the generative power, because when the sexual force sets in, that is when the spirit becomes actually connected with the body itself, when there's the whole, and once the spirit is connected, fully connected, at this moment the child can begin to experience the vibrations of the surroundings, exciting vibrations. They might be of a good nature, they might be of a bad nature, they might be mixed, all kinds of vibration the child can let in and can experience and taste and can decide to follow those vibrations. And it can decide but also to turn against something. At this moment, then should we start teaching what is wrong or what is right? In my opinion, yes, we should not start teaching what is right and what is wrong, but explain to the child, to that young adult, that child becoming a young woman or the child becoming a young man at the time. We should help them to understand what is going on with them, and that they really have to decide themselves now, that they can now actually perceive what is right and what is wrong, and that they actually can feel it to their fingertips, and everyone knows it in their fingertips if something is right or wrong. That is simply the spirit speaking, and the spirit registers very finely, and the boy, he knows that it is wrong to pull out the wings of a butterfly or something like this, and he feels it, and he knows if he's doing something and he's saying, oh, that's a wicked thing to do. He likes to do the wicked thing, and he's attracted by the wicked thing, and he calls it already by the right name. It's a wicked thing to do. Then he knows it. If he does it in spite of that he knows that's a wicked thing to do because he named it that way. He's doing it. It is now his own responsibility. And unfortunately, I think the young people often go into the wrong direction. But in my experience, there are also many people who are going in the right direction nowadays. And especially if I look at young men which come in the university, which have the age of about 18, 20, and they come into the university, I'm quite surprised how polite and regardful of the other person young men are, especially young men, not so much young girls. And so hopefully, I think, and one has to strengthen that, and the best thing to strengthen is to be polite and helpful yourself, so that you're an example to the young people around you. I think I'll hand back that question, Brother Femi, because I do not want to go on. It's a very specific question.
Thank you.
I think to deal with that question, we really should only talk about the adult person, which is after puberty, where you can call it really a young woman or young man, and during that time.
Thank you.
Can I
Thank you.
just add a little bit to what you've just said?
Yes, please go ahead, Brother William.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, the thing that's very poignant about what you say, and we do know that that full responsibility does set in at a certain time. You use the term sexual force. Some according to the message, also in the English translation, the term generative power is used, and it's supposed to coincide with that period when people start to take responsibility for their actions, and that's because the spirit has actually taken full made that full connection. The spiritual power has united with this force, and so that person, the spirit, has now become truly responsible in creation, responsible for his actions. Now, prior to that period of maturity, which a lot of the countries have rightfully discerned as coinciding with that teenage period, with most of these, prior to that, it is important to guide children, and to understand that children at that early stage are mostly functioning with imitative instincts. So their children are more closer, as it were, to the animals. They're closer to nature. They're closer to nature, and so children function mainly, even though the spirit is there, but the spirit has not fully become awake or active within that cloak. So a lot of them, they function mainly with instincts, and so they're imitative instincts, and so it's important to model the right thing and the right ways to do stuff. And that's where the responsibility of the parent comes in terms of guidance, in terms of modeling, because it's not just one thing. It's not just about sitting a child and telling the child, this is that and this is what you need to do, but also they need to see you and observe you do the right thing. And then you find out that they follow a lot of the things. They're observing you very keenly, and they're mimicking what you're trying to do. So we must make sure that we're forming positive, being the positive role models to these children at that stage, and then gradually explaining to them these things, because that foundation period is also quite important. And that if they're totally misguided at that stage, and they pick up a lot of these wrong concepts or terminologies and other things, something that can really affect them for in their adult life, and it can really totally derail them. But yes, you guide them and you model these things, but as they start to now become mature, and that responsibility starts to set in, then you have to make that transition from being that parent who is really guiding them, to being a friend of them, who is just allowing them to express themselves, and allowing their free will or decision making to take effect. So it's knowing that we have to also transition from, in terms of parents, as being those guides and models, to also gradually letting them to nurture and become full adults, and take full responsibility. That's all I wanted to add to that.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much for that addition. Um, Listeners, this is Blessed Radio. You are listening to the Tuesday evening spiritual discussion program. The aim of this show is to introduce the work in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. The topic that we have been discussing tonight is the concept of morality. The discussion has ranged quite extensively from what exactly is morality, how do you know what is moral versus what is immoral, changing standards over the generations, and many other things. A key point that I would like to raise before I move on to another question is that for our listeners, I would personally recommend that you should obtain a copy of the Grail message and examine it yourself. There is so much distortion, there is so much inappropriate guidance, confusion in the world that we live in today, even within spiritual circles. What is truly right? Only your spirit can guide you. But how do you even make the connection with your spirit? These are topics that hopefully you will find hints to by examining the Grail message. So, Brother Gregory, a question from a listener here. What about my intuition? What about my conscience? How do I know when they're communicating with me? And what actually is the difference between my conscience and my intuition? To Brother Gregory, please.
Well, thanks. The talk is between conscience and one's intuition. Conscience is mentioned as part of an inner communication or an inner sensing, not intellectual. Intuition is that which is sort of the vibrations of the inner man. So when the inner man is astir, it means it's able to pick up the vibrations of the supports, of the guides. It's able to pick up the vibrations and supports of those around it, which tends to drag it up, to ennoble it. That is what is referred to as conscience, as different from listening or allowing the frontal brain to take full, let's say, full force or full control. Conscience and intuitions are connected, whereas the intuition is the voice or the perception of the spirit, and it's at that point that it's able to perceive all those vibrations that seek to ennoble it and seek to, open itself so as to pay heed to these vibrations. These vibrations do come from personalities that have similar tendencies or personalities that wish to be of help or like helpers. So conscience and intuition is at a higher level, whereas reasoning is more of the intellect. How does one recognize one's intuition? It is not that one recognizes one's intuition. The inner man, the vibrations of the inner man, is what one may refer to, or what should be referred to, as one's intuition, those vibrations. So one should not think that on the one hand, the inner man is here, and on the other hand, the personality is somewhere else. It is either the inner man is fully awake or is awake and is able to make decisions spiritually, or it is not. When it is not, then we have a quagmire that the world has found itself. So conscience and intuition, they go together.
Thank you, Brother Gregory. I must admit that personally, I've actually gained quite a lot from this series of discussions that we've been having, and that a topic such as morality can bring up so much diversity. Just goes to show the depth of the spiritual awareness and the spiritual knowledge that we really need to urgently acquire. Now, I'm just wondering that, given the depth of this whole issue of morality, has anyone gotten anything that they would like to share from the Grail message for our listeners that may help them further in their seeking for a way out of the mess that we're all in, to put it mildly? No.
I think I'll just like to read a little bit. In the whole discussion, we have not mentioned the role of the woman. And in going towards a moral society, going towards a moral society and something to uplift the whole people, of course, woman is the more decisive factor because of her much finer, more sensitive intuition. And since we complain a lot about women, or there's so much going on, let me just read one sentence from the Grail message about woman. She, woman, will always be nothing but the true reflection of that world of thought forms hovering over her people. This must not be forgotten. Respect and honor woman as such, and she will form herself accordingly. She will become what you see in her, and in this way you uplift your whole people. I think that in these very simple words, it says, if we complain about the immorality nowadays, and especially about the immorality we see in women, we really should blame ourselves, because she's just a true reflection of that world of thought forms, which we created through our thinking. And so we must become more pure in our thinking, and we must start respecting and honor woman as such, and that is the best way to uplift the people and to embark on that new way out of this moral mess we are in today. I'll stop here and hand it back to you.
Thank you very much for that, Brother Rainer. It's quite disheartening when one thinks about the intensity of the decay in the social fabric of the society, and like you said, it's very easy to point fingers at the ladies in the society, but of course, what they're reflecting, as you rightly pointed out, is purely that thought world of thought forms that surrounds them, which we all contribute to in a very decisive way. You know, it's so critical that we truly equip ourselves with genuine knowledge that can assist us with being able to map our way out of the maze that we currently are in, and the sense of urgency cannot be overemphasized. Okay, so Brother William, modern education. I know that we've spoken extensively about children and responsibility and guidance and so on and so forth this evening. But there is a question talking about modern education and the need for people to be free, to be able to express themselves, that simply results in an upliftment of the human society, and that only impure thinking can actually make something appear impure. Brother William, would you like to just share your thoughts on that comment, please?
Yes, I think we've been talking about all day, and that is that when we're talking about morality, it is something that is of a spiritual purpose. And what has happened is we have evolved, as the human beings have evolved over time, in different ways. I think sometimes some of our behavior and some of the evolution has been regressive, and some of them have been progressive towards becoming better human beings. If you talk about the educational system, one of the things about the educational system, I think that's something that has become quite problematic, is that it is quite rigid. It attempts to classify or to bring or all these children to assess them under one umbrella or a broad brush, you see. And what that does not take into account is the individuality of the human spirit. It does not take into the account that people have various abilities, people have various talents, people have various gifts, and if you want to assess people just based on one model of intelligence, um, it's going to basically, it would not help to harness all the other talents that the other people don't. So if they don't fit into that umbrella, then what you're saying, that person is not intelligent. What about the person who is creative? What about the person who has the abilities to speak? What about so we all have different talents, and the educational system is not encouraging people to develop these abilities and talents that they have. Having said that, it is important to note that it has to be based on that framework of the truth, of knowledge, proper knowledge that is able to help awaken these people, awaken the spirits as they start to make that transition from adolescence into early adulthood. It tries to allow them to express themselves in ways that are, that are in consonance with what dignified human beings should be doing. So it's something very important for the educational system to take into account, that we cannot classify everybody or all these young people under one umbrella, but that we can help imbibe certain principles, certain, will I say, ethics in them, but allow them to also develop along different ways, along these abilities, through guiding them in the right direction. So that's what I can say really about the the system, the educational system, and young people. And so right now, I am seeing in my clinic a lot of the young people in distress. The most stressful times of the year for young people during the times during term times, like we've just finished in the UK, for instance. We've just finished the GCSE exams and the A-level exams, and I have to say, each year it's becoming even more alarming how disturbed these young people are. They're so distressed. Some of them come in, they're feeling suicidal. They don't want to even go to school. A lot of them are in really, in anguish, and you're wondering, and they're telling you they don't want to go to school. Why? They can't really tell you why. They just don't want to go to school. Or they come up with different reasons, And then they're on holiday, and things calm down, So what does that tell you? Is education. That means that the education is seriously a problem for a lot of these people. And we need to look into these things and gradually evolve or develop bespoke type systems that would be tailored towards the various needs or abilities of these young people, and to use one system and want to educate them in this a single kind of way or approach is doing a serious disservice to these young people, and we're going to continue to see a lot of rebellion amongst them because it's not really right, and it's not really suited for them. So that's part of the problem that we're having to pick up or we're noticing in the society now. So let me stop there.
Thank you for that. And in fact, that kind of nicely brings me to the last question for today, which is actually from a listener. The listener says, "I am of the opinion that it does not matter what the beliefs around you are. Your spiritual foundation is the most important thing. We must all endeavor to learn what the Almighty requires of us and hold on to this, to do all that is within us, to live in an upright manner." And then the question basically says, should morality be taught? Or I guess maybe it should better be raised as, should spirituality be taught? Since we're saying that the fundamental basis of our existence and being able to navigate our way through the maze called life that we live in is a proper spiritual recognition. Should it be taught? Brother William, if you can still take that question, please.
Yes, thanks again for that question, and thank the listener for his observation. Now, it's not a yes or no type answer, and I'll tell you why. If we're talking about morality being something of a spiritual purpose, and then we're talking about something taught, or taught, then you find out that when we start thinking about teaching, it's we're talking about erudition, learning stuff, and it's really serving the intellect, you see. But yes, in a way, I believe that there needs to be guidance, and when young people haven't had a sense of a true sense, really, of what's right and wrong, and like we mentioned earlier, that there's not been that spiritual maturity or development just yet, or they've not been able to take responsibility, then they need guidance, and guiding them in some of the right principles is fine, but it does not become knowledge, true knowledge, until they've experienced these things, until they've experienced life, or they experience, had the consequence and their actions, and that's how they gradually mature. Life is about experiencing, so it's experiences that we, through the experiences that we grow. But prior to that period where that full experiencing kicks in, it's important to, stress that they need the right foundation. And the right foundation is in some degree of guidance into some of these basic principles that pertain to human decency, and then gradually, when they as they get older and more mature, they would either start to resonate with these things, or they might decide to take courses that are totally divergent. But I think it's important for them to be properly guided. I think it's important for adults to be proper role models to these young people, so that they learn to gradually take responsibility for their actions and become more responsible members of the society at large. So I'll stop there.
Okay, so dear listeners, it's coming up to 8 o'clock now, and we will be wrapping up the show. But before we do, if I could ask Brother Gregory, is there anything that you would like to add before the end of the show?
Nothing much other than to wish everybody the strength to examine the work if they decide to.
Thank you. Brother Reiner?
A simple goodbye from my side, and I'm looking forward to next Tuesday. Goodbye.
Thank you. And Brother William?
Yeah, as usual, it has been a pleasure to be part of this conversation or discuss. I wouldn't be around for the next few weeks, but hopefully I'll be back soon. Thank you, and I wish you a nice week. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. So, dear listeners, that brings us to the end of this show for this week. We will be on air same time, 6 to 8 on Tuesday of next week. Please join us, and if you can, do reflect on some of the key points that have been raised on the topic of morality that we've discussed today. As you know, the show is based on the teachings from the Grail message in the light of truth by Abdushin. This is literature or a book that you can acquire from any of the more popular online websites or from the website thegrailmessage.com. Wishing everyone a wonderful evening and a beautiful rest of the week, and we shall be back next week. Thank you.